Winston, if we have Winston, Tommy, and Chris, and remember 30 and 1.
Good morning. The current school board has a goal that 50% of Black and Hispanic students achieve college and career readiness in 3rd grade reading. What happens to the other 50%? And also, if you are elected, what would be a realistic goal or a realistic percentage in which you believe poor Black students can achieve college and career readiness?
Well, I guess we'll start down here. I believe that goal is too low because we can't have any child left behind. I believe it's the lower standards that have gotten us where we are right now. Now, in terms of a percentage, I'm an overachiever. I want 100% because I don't believe we need to let anybody go through our school system and be socially promoted. And so we need to go and make sure that every child, no matter their color, no matter their socially economic background, is educated for career and college readiness. We cannot afford to lower our standards because what happens is when they leave our school system and go into a world that their higher standards, they get swallowed up. I have a son who went to Virginia Tech. And because we did not allow C's and D's in our home, he was able to excel. Out of the 30,000 students that applied, he was able to be accepted because we did not lower our standards. We pushed him to a high standard. So I think the standard's too low. And be real is the standards have gone lower since the pandemic.
I agree. 50% is incredibly too low. 70 is too low. We need to have all children passing and on grade level. Unfortunately, when you look at the test, grade level is only achieving at about 30%. So we need to raise that. We have to have every child ready. We need to focus and take those children and give additional resources, not just money. We need to find the people. I was talking to someone just earlier. Where are the people? We have to get the community in, get the parents, get community leaders into the schools and focus on Black and brown children, all children, lower socioeconomic children, because when they go into the business world, it perpetuates. They will not be able to get those jobs. They won't be able to help their children. So we have failed at 50%.
I'm going to bring in hopefully 3 quick points. 1, the test that decides if you're career ready is inherently biased. And if you look at our schools that are failing versus A's, they are equal to affluent areas in our county. So yes, while that test is important and while NCFEs and all of those AOGs are important tests, they are not the only way to show that our kids are career ready. So while you say 50% is low, and I will agree with you that it needs to be 100%, how many of you have ever said, I'm going to start working out this year and I'm going to work out every single day? And how many of you have actually still done that? That's great. My point exactly. 50% is a starting point. Let's increase. That's a huge amount from what we are now. That's a big goal. Let's start there. If we get that, all right, bump it up. We know as educators and as people that little goals are easier to achieve and keep working and keep motivating you to go farther. So yes, I want 100%, but right now, let's start with this group and then move on. So we go to 50, then we go to 75, then we'll get 100. We'll get there. It's not going to happen in the 3 or 4 years that we're going to be on this board.
Long-term problems, no short-term answers. If there was a magic bullet, all the districts in this country would be doing it. Mm-hmm. One of the statistics that bothers me the most is 66% of children in the nation arrive at kindergarten with no early literacy foundation. 0. They're not taught, they're not read books at home. They are not having books read to them. They don't understand how to turn a page. They don't know how to hold a pair of scissors. So we start with 66% of the kids not even knowing some basic foundational stuff. Number 2, 29% of our students last year were chronically absent. We cannot, no matter what programs we put into place, if we find a magic bullet, we can't teach it to them if they're not in class. So chronic absenteeism has got to be corrected. High school kids, they may ditch, but elementary kids, it's up on the family to get them on the bus or out the door to school. So we have to have a community commitment. I hope our ministers and our community leaders across this county will preach from their pulpit to get your kid to school, because we cannot teach them if they are not there. So that is one way to fix this. I could talk for 5.5 hours a day.
So some good points have been made. I guess what I'll add, it is a national problem, right? 54% of adults read below a 6th grade level. A great place to start is with young people, right? And so I think 50% is too low. I think that's a hopeless goal. And I think reading should be, absolutely the focus of those younger levels. I'm all for pragmatism in goals like graduation rate, but I think we've got to be outrageous in our goals with younger people. Again, because it is the foundation. We're never going to volunteer our way out of this, but right now, when we're coming out of COVID and some disruption, this would be and an interim leadership in the district. The next 18 months would be a great time for an all hands on deck type of volunteerism. So I'll leave it at that.
Yes, 50% is very low, but I think it takes those gains can be done incrementally over time. The better question is, why is this occurring to our poor kids, Black kids, and Hispanic kids? The why. What's the reason behind this? I think it's going to take a board that's intentional with professional development, because I think what it is, if you look at the makeup of the teachers, they don't look like the students, and they may not understand the cultures and how to teach certain kids. So I think if we provide the professional development on how do we reach these kids, poor kids, because there may be other things that they're thinking about that teachers aren't addressing. I'm not thinking about reading right now. I'm hungry, or I need some social emotional development. We need to make sure we understand that there are other needs when you just say poor kids that need to be met, and the teachers need to understand that, and they need to go through development on how to approach those kids that may learn different. So I think the why is more important.
Thank you. I looked at, granted, that is a low goal. When they mention these things as goals, not as measurable objectives. The school board for over years have not placed any measurable objectives on the superintendent, and thus down to the principals, and thus down to the teachers. You got to set a standard. Like I know in the business world, that was the way it was. And if you did not perform, you were out the door. I know that's a harsh thing to say, but the teachers need to be supported also by discipline within the school, because you can't manage a good classroom if you've got mayhem going on in your class. You've got to have a manageable classroom, and that needs principal support of discipline. So I think those all go together, where you set standards, and you set standards for performance and set standards for behavior. Thank you.
Thank you. My question is, I sat here and heard everybody talk about what the kids need. Have anybody ever asked the kids what they need or what they want? You know, you can have boards with kids on it where you can ask them what they need or what they want. Because I remember when I was in school, everybody made decisions for me, you know, and they never asked me what did I want. You know, so do you have any boards with kids on it, have input, you know, in the decision-making process?
Okay.
Yeah,
We'll start.
you start down at the end?
Yes.
Okay, I'm glad you bring that up, because that is one of the things that I learned in teaching a couple courses that I taught, where the kids were starting leading themselves. In other words, I did a military science thing where the kids were organized and marching, and we would alternate the people who would lead in the marching. And the kids loved it because they were controlling controlling everything in that in that formation. And I think that's military has done this for years. Granted, they're older at that, but I think you can bring that further down and allowing that more participation in that and giving certain people, everybody get a chance to lead. And I think that would be, I think it's going to help, I think, in answering that thing where you get more of an interplay and input from students. Thank you.
Yes, there are ways to engage students. You have the student advisory councils, you have Generation Nation, all these different organizations that give feedback, right? But many times those are the students that are handpicked, that are high achievers, high flyers, right? So you don't get the full input from all the students. But there is data points that the district uses. At the beginning of the year, everyone does something that's it's panorama. It's a survey. Lets you know, how do I feel about myself? How do I feel about my achievement, my self-efficacy? But is the district really reviewing that data? That data comes from everyone. Do I feel comfortable in my abilities? So directly, do you ask the question? No, but you can look at the data and say, how do all the students across the board feel about their performance in school? So I think you have to have leadership or innovative thinkers to think outside the box. How many board members have really even reviewed the panorama data? I have. I know what it says between K and 3. So you have to be very innovative to think outside the box to get the student input.
Great question. When I was a teacher, I did my own surveys of kids to ask, how am I doing? What's working? What's not working? So I did that several times a year because I wanted that real-time feedback so that I could adapt. When I led a division of a $5 billion company, we sold tires. I would go to the warehouses that were under my leadership, and I would say, hey, managers, directors, you're out. I want to talk to the guys, right? The front line, because I want to see how they're doing, if they have any concerns. And I listened. I fired the number 2 guy in my division when I found out some of the things that he was doing that frontline people had told me. In my campaign, I am talking to students directly right now. Hey, what do you think of this? Is this true? I've heard this. What's your perception? When I was on the board from 2006 to 2011, I would go and seek feedback. I can recall the meeting that pops into my mind is when I went to Harding. I asked for a student-only meeting, kick the teachers out. I just want to hear from kids. So yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. A lot of the things that we are doing now need to be enhanced. Generation Nation, some of those are kind of the handpicked kids, or the kids that tend to want to get scholarships and be leaders, so they apply for a lot of that stuff. The only way to really hear the voice of students, the panorama data is great, and I think that we have started listening to that data by developing and putting more money into the multi-tier support system, the MTSS that you'll hear about, the social emotional learning components that you'll hear about. So we are I think we are starting to do that. We were not doing that. But I also caution, if I let my son make the decision about what we had for dinner every night, it would be pizza, and I would weigh 400 pounds. So I still think that the adults have to be in on that decision making. I want kids to have a voice. Having a voice doesn't necessarily mean that they are making all the decisions, but we need to hear from them. The other biggest challenge is, are we teaching kids the way they need to be taught, the way they learn? We have a lot of kids that don't learn the same way, and we're not doing, in my opinion, a great job with that.
So absolutely. Rhonda didn't mention it. I'm going to mention it. There is a student position on the board. They're non-voting, but they are allowed to give their opinion. That needs to happen across the board. Teachers need to have input onto the board. Teachers can't be on the board if they work for CMS. It's a conflict of interest. Okay, but let's have a non-voting position like we do students. Our teachers are just as important as our students. And yes, our students can tell us yes or no. And the panorama survey, I can tell you, I've been in 3 different schools through CMS. We all, at the very beginning of the year, sit down with the overall graphs and say, 50% of our kids do not feel safe in school. What are we going to do about it? And we have those discussions as educators on how we can do that in our school. We need to do that as a county. So yes, That is one data point. And just like Rhonda poked at, I have a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old. Once again, I would have chicken nuggets and macaroni and cheese every single night if they made all the decisions. So yes, there needs to be a combination of them.
I agree, and I'm glad you brought up the point of the student on the board. Elementary, we should start leadership at the elementary level, and there are many elementary schools that do that, and then it leads into the middle school and into the high school, and they have leadership classes. We need to open that and make it reflective of the school so that all children in EC programs should be part of that leadership because they can lead within their own groups. So we need to listen, we need to balance it, and they need to have a voice because if they have ownership, they will lead their own. So yes.
Actually, that's what brought me here to Charlotte over 17 years ago. I was a youth pastor of over 3,500 students, and I had to learn to earn the right to be heard. We have to go to where students are. We can't go there with all our leadership on. We have to go there and meet them at their level. And not only the ones that are at the leadership council, but there's a whole host of them that will not come there. So we need to go sit in lunchrooms. We need to go to where they hang out. We need to go to football games, earn the right to be heard, and hear what they're saying so that we can come back and make informed policies and decisions that are going to affect everyone and even the least of them. And so we cannot be scared to interact with our children, even though they sound different from us, they look different from us, they dress different from us. But we have a responsibility to engage them, to hear what they're saying, and be able to come back and process it with the information we have and make informed decisions. We're not going to allow them to make all decisions, but their input is very valuable. And that is a part of the tripod of education: the student, the parent, as well as the educator.
Okay, Crispin, and we're gonna ask for 45 seconds for the answer because we have about 5 people that have questions and we have to be out of here at 10 o'clock. Please, at 10 o'clock, let's move out. Okay, Crispin.
Well, parents, with so many aspects that goes into just developing a child, these individuals, is there any other way to gauge just like their progression other than just like to diminish just intelligence through tests, standardized? Like, is it any?
I'll answer it. I was a teacher. I had a student at Smith Middle School. He could not read. Now, he was in 8th grade, could not read. Smartest young man I ever had. And what I would do is I was teaching, once I figured out he couldn't read what I was putting out there, but every day he was answering those questions and he was learning. First of all, I got him referred and tried to get services for him. But I would question him. So I didn't test him. I gave him the test that day. You know, everybody else, I'm not going to say, oh, you can't read, but I wouldn't grade it. I graded him all along. There's a lot of performance-based education out there that we can evaluate using performance by what they do. So, yes.
I'm going to tell you a personal story. I'm going to tell you, I struggled in school. I was not a student. I was not a good student. I got C's because that's all I could get. C's were A's to me. So yeah, while my parents had high expectations, they were okay with C's because they knew that was the best I could do. I have learning disabilities. I have an immune issue. I had hurdles. And guess what? I'm here. I have a bachelor's degree. I'm a national board certified teacher. I have a master's degree in online technology and online education. And I run one of the largest pro-public education groups in the state to do advocacy for our students across the state. I wouldn't have been able to do where I am today if teachers only tested me. There are thousands of other ways, including a conversation right here and there.
Just gonna make it easy. Standardized testing is not the only way to measure a child. It's not the only way to measure a college student. It's not the only way to measure an adult. We have to do it individualized. Most teachers when they know that there's a student that doesn't do well with testing, they can do one-on-one where they actually build a portfolio for the student over the course of the year to show that they have actually accomplished the grade level achievement. I mean, I have one daughter that is amazing at standardized testing, the other one not. The one that is not amazing is a registered nurse with 2 degrees and very productive member of society. And she could not pass her SAT to save her life. So we need to do portfolio management is one of the best ways to measure how students are doing. And that takes a teacher that is engaged with their student.
Can I say one thing about that? But as a board, when we're looking at a superintendent, we need to make sure a superintendent understands how to build an environment where a teacher can do those type of things. Because our teachers are overwhelmed right now because there's not a team effect touching our children. And so it has to start from the top tier leadership where we understand we have to build environments where we can build relationships with our students, where we're not only looking at their standardized tests. They are not objects, they are people. And we have to be able to educate them as people, but we have to have an environment that is conducive where we can educate them as people and not just manage them through a system. And so, yes, I agree with you, but we have to create that environment where that can happen. And I believe that's what teachers want.
Okay, Trent.
Yeah, and so I guess maybe what hasn't been said, and I'll go there, is that we need to have multiple measures that are not exceptions, but they're part of the structure so that they're built in, that when we do realize, hey, we're not capturing what this student knows through testing, we can immediately go to the other options that we've already built in. And we're still going to get dinged by the state because the student didn't do well on the test. That's when we have to be ready to tell our own story that, hey, we are measuring in other ways, and this is what we're doing.
Standardized testing, we should view it as a data point. It's not really, it doesn't define who you are. And I think as a board member, we have to kind of educate the public and inform our parents. That's just a data point. That doesn't define your trajectory on where you're going. There are, of course, there are individualized education plans that can be implemented. But we need a board that's going to be aggressive. It's a shame that the EOC is, I think it's worth 20% of your final grade if you're in high school. That's at the state level. We need to inform them, hey, this is not working for us. You can have an A student throughout the entire year, and you do bad on that one test, it could just kill your GPA. But we have to inform our state, hey, at our local level, this is not working. So it takes an innovative board to be aggressive to say, we're not doing it.
Okay, Fountain.
Yes, I think all these folks right here said it right on, because the testing of, because some people come, like you were saying, they were able to solve problems and understand what's going on when they may have a reading problem, they may have a speech problem. There's a variety of different ways, but they still have that knowledge. I know as a teacher, I ran into that when I was doing middle school for a little bit. It's the same type of thing. And yet we took him off to the side and worked through with him to be able to understand that he did understand some of the concepts.
Okay, Rashid, what's the next question?
Okay. Like a lot of you guys were talking about like increasing standards for students and like meeting certain goals. So like, how do you plan to get students to meet these goals? And like, if you answer like hire like better staff or something, how do you plan to recruit and retain like the better staff members?
Okay, we're gonna start with Ron.
All right. Recruiting and retention. We need to pay our teachers a fair wage. We need to make sure that working conditions are improved. We need to make sure that the culture is conducive for productive work, which that comes from the top down. And we need to provide the kind of professional development that will train them and give them the extra tools they need to help students advance. One of those right now is in reading competencies. The LETTERS program that the state has coming out is actually very good at the science of reading. And so our teachers are participating in that. One of the things as a board that we did is we gave extra professional development time off. And it made a lot of parents mad because we had kids out of school so that teachers could actually attend this state mandated LETTERS training.
Okay, Dee.
For me, I think one of the things I'm focused on really is to improve the MTSS system that we have. I think that, yeah, we can say we're going to hire more, we're going to retain teachers more. That's a national thing. That's difficult in every industry. But right now, the MTSS system, I think, is different in every single school. But I think there needs to be some type of standard that's set across the board that's used in every single school. And as a board member, I want to hold the individuals accountable to make sure that that's being done in each school. That makes sense. You can still have the flexibility to work within your school to raise. If you don't know, MTSS works with those kids that are in the, say, lower part of performance. We have to be intentional with working with those students and improve that system and make it more standardized across the board to make sure everything's done at the same school, with the same effort.
Thank you. Lisa?
I agree that we have to address the reading and the lower scores, but we have to be creative within the schools. When I was at West Met, the teachers came together and formulated plans to reach those children. It may have been staying after school, providing the transportation, working one-on-one, finding out what was going on that caused the reading and the deficits, not just reading, but in math. So we have to do individualized plans because not everybody's going to learn the same way. And we have to reach them where they are. And that's really where our focus should be with students who are struggling.
Okay, Fisher?
I agree that we need to create a better environment, work environment for our teachers, as well as inform parents about how their students are doing better with the MTSS system. But I also believe that there are community organizations that can assist our children with grasping their education. We need to engage them, not the same old organizations that we've used time and time again. But there's some community organizations that have been alienated that work. There's an organization called YDI, and they've taken repeat juvenile offenders, and now some of those offenders have PhDs today. But the school system has alienated them from working along there. So we need to build partnerships with our community because what they don't do in school, they can do after school in their community. And so there's a holistic approach that we need to take to increase the higher standards.
Melissa?
So I think I have a unique perspective on this because I was one of those teachers. I left CMS in 2001, January of 2001. And yes, pay is a big deal. Yes, respect, professionalism. Yes, all of that. To retain our teachers, we need to stand behind our teachers. As a board, we should be supporting our teachers not only on a local level, but on a state level. A lot of what is causing the teacher exodus right now is not CMS. It's not things that we can control. But what we can do is sit there and be a voice for our educators. And like Rhonda mentioned earlier in the day, making sure that we have safe schools, making sure that we have safe environments for our teachers, making sure that our teachers feel supported, because guess what? That's going to trickle down. Everyone has said from the top down, right? Well, that includes in the classroom. Making sure that our teachers are supported will help our students be supported.
Okay, Fountain?
Yes, as I went back earlier to what I said earlier, was that I think that one of the key things about the teachers are leaving is because of the lack of discipline with the school. And in other words, it's your work environment. If you're not comfortable in being able to really teach your children, that kind of says, well, what am I doing here? I'm wasting my time. So I think that's one of the key things is they keep saying about supporting teachers. I think a part of that supporting is insisting on discipline, because you want to set standard behavior for children. The school system should be a haven for structure. And that's, to me, that's the essence of all this, that we don't have that structure, and you're going to have this problem of people leaving, not because of pay. They're moving to other counties where there's a little bit better working environment.
Sir, I'd like to point out something real quick.
It's my turn.
We don't do that.
I apologize. Right.
Thank you. So, as far as what the board can do, I'd like to start over, please. Thank you. So, one criticism of what we have right now is I think we've got a laundry list of stuff that we do, but we don't really have a culture. And one of the things that a board can do is establish culture. Without culture, nothing's going to really take. And the board sets tone. It's about what the board focuses on. It's about how the board talks about things. Then it's about hiring the right leader as superintendent. It's about empowering principals. It's about better and more swift use of data down to the classroom level so that we can help teachers adapt. But again, that only takes if the board is starting at the top. We're setting a healthy culture.
Okay, we have Mary Johnson, Carlenia Ivory, and then Mary Clance, and then,
Okay, I'm gonna be real quick here. The schools have been graded. The A schools, Audrey Care, Ray, Farm, Huff, Bailey, Blair, Community House, Polo Ridge, Hawk Ridge, and J. Robinson. F schools, Ashley Park, Cochran, Marie G. Davis, Druid Hills, Hickory Grove, Hornets Nest, James Martin, Ransom, Statesville Road, Martin Luther King, Oakdale, Bruns Avenue, and Star Mount. Okay, tell me, what makes them an A school and what makes these an F school? And what can we do to, I guess I'm a proponent of strong teachers in schools. And I would like to know why some of these A teachers can't come over to some of these F schools and help these children.
and this person is for.
Well, anybody.
Okay, we'll start with you, Ron.
I have two schools on the A list and 2 on the F list. I wish I could move my teachers around, but they're not the right grade level, number one. But I think what makes the difference is the culture at the school, the resources at the school, the absenteeism rate. And when we do a deeper dive in all of that, we're going to see significant differences in absenteeism at our A schools and our F schools. We already did that when we did the Breaking the Link report a few years ago. We showed significant difference in attendance rates, not just for students, but for teachers and staff. So got to be there. The teachers have to be there. Experienced teachers, qualified teachers, we need to make sure that that happens. But at the same time, when we're talking about creating a culture for teachers where they want to feel included, it's real hard to tell a teacher, you have to go teach somewhere else. We want to still be inclusive. So there's multiple challenges, and we're just doing a deeper dive. The school that's on the F list for me was not an F before, so we need to find out what made them change.
Okay, Trent, since you've been on school.
Sure. So what we did in my company when we had a distribution center that was underperforming is we enticed and attracted the best leader to go to that place and to hire whomever he or she wanted, and we gave them free reign for 2 years to do whatever they needed to do to change the culture. We have some experience in that, and from 2006 to 2011 in CMS, I don't think we went far enough, but it's about leadership and getting the right leaders to those schools because the best teachers want to work for the best principals, and it's going to take more money. It's going to take finding good community partners for those schools, but that's the way that this works.
Does anyone else just want to jump in there? Can we go on to another question?
Really quickly, I could, just really briefly. Those report cards don't define those students, right? But I will say we have to identify supportive administration and teachers that want to be there. My daughter, she wants to be at Chamber. She don't want to teach at Huff. She wants to teach at Chamber because she sees the greatness in those students, and we have to provide the support and the professional development for our teachers so they can know how to teach those students. The schools you name, the demographics are different. They may learn different. Their experiences are different. So we have to identify those. Just because you're doing well at Huff don't mean you're going to do well at West Charlotte. You have to identify those teachers that can adapt and want to be there and incentivize them somehow.
Okay, Carlene has a question.
Yes. Basically, my question is, this is September. Is it September?
Yes,
September. And so we have a superintendent and we're supposed to be hiring a new superintendent. I would like to know, where are we in that process and that timeline? And I know a lot of you are not on the school board yet, but some might be on in November. But where are we in that timeline? And my other concern is, why don't we have
and it's not just CMS, a succession plan. So we won't have to be worried about who the next superintendent might be. Rhonda, can
Sure. I mean, right now, because of the board election being such a big deal and definitely some changes are going to occur, the leadership of the board, with sort of our consent, decided not to engage a search firm or go any further until after the new board is seated. But what we have started is a community engagement where we're actually, we just met last week with the firm that's going to be surveying multiple members of the community to find out, to build a superintendent, Trent, you know what it's called? Platform.
Profile committee.
Superintendent profile, to find out what is important to members of the community. And that at that point, when the new board is engaged or on board, then they will determine the search firm and how to go forward. So that has kind of started. As far as the succession plan, we've tried both ways. We've hired from within and we have hired from outside. There's good and bad that has come of that.
Okay.
Please make sure
Mary,
you choose
Mary.
in the feedback when you talk about community engagement.
I believe your name's actually on the list.
Thank you, but I want Tuesday morning as a forum to make sure that we're included when feedback is needed for a new superintendent.
Okay, Mary Clean.
Thank you. I was going to ask you about the bringing effective teachers into the classroom, but the last discussion touched on that, but maybe in the future we can have a little bit more specifics. But I'd like to frame this very last question quickly. What can the board do? What do you see as the most important actions to address low student achievement around what the board can do, not what we would like, what we think? The board is a policy-making board. So if you could be specific around that, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, we'll start with, Fountain. And
Yes.
he's gonna allow us to stay in here, they're gonna move the other people to another location, so we have a 3 more minutes.
Yeah, so we have,
Okay, for those that have to
Yeah.
leave, that's fine, but we have a couple more questions, but, if you all can answer her question, you have to leave right now, Melissa?
No, I don't.
No.
You're asking me?
Yes,
So,
go ahead.
yep. I think that one of the key things is that the board can start doing is to insist on measurable objectives and on disciplined children based on whatever the behavior is. The misbehavior, not, based on any particular race or whatever. Just if there's because that way you can set expectations within the school community and by setting those expectations, then people know where they should go. And like I said, discipline and setting manageable objectives. I think that's something the board is empowered to do and should do.
If you know your role as a board member, we don't deal with pedagogy or discipline. But what we do is we hire an effective superintendent. So you have to be able to have a superintendent. To me, I think we have to make sure he's equity focused. He has high expectations, has management skill sets, but detail and data oriented. And the most he needs to do is make sure he supports his staff and his educators. So as a board member, we create that policy that's effective, but then also we bring in a superintendent that has all those different qualities that can create this environment that we want, that students can perform.
So building on what Dee said, the other thing I would add is that people do the behavior that you incentivize them to do. So, any performance element in a new superintendent's contract should be laser focused on achievement. The other thing, and I'm encouraged by the board recently adopted a calendar to where they're going to hold themselves accountable to a monitoring calendar where they're looking at different aspects of student achievement at every meeting. I love that. We're going to see if their leadership, executive leadership that reports to the board can pull that off. But they're on the right path with that. Every meeting should be focused on those goals, because if the board is focused on that, the organization is going to focus on that as well.
The number one thing that I think I was asked this by the League of Women Voters on their questionnaire, I'm not sure, but I think it asked what our top priority as a board or our top job as a board should be, and that is to hire, fire, and monitor the superintendent. All the other functions that are granted to us by state statute, which are setting student assignment boundaries, operating budget, and all those are second to putting the right person at the top. That dictates everything going down, and that person does have to have the laser focus on academic outcomes. That is by far the top priority. Done. That's it. If you have the right person, I guess the next thing I would add is that person has to be the kind of leader that's not only visionary, but the kind of leader that attracts the people under him that are maybe even better than him at their subject matter.
Yeah, I'm going to echo what some of my colleagues have said in that if our teachers feel supported with a superintendent and a board that stands behind them, then all of that will trickle down. So yes, as a policy-making board, we need to make sure that our policies are in place to protect our teachers. We need to support our teachers. We need to protect our students. And we need to pick a superintendent that has all of the qualities that have already been listed. They encourage growth within the district. They support what's going on in the district and what's happening and are in the knowledge with our teachers. They know what's going on with, at least maybe not the day-to-day, but overall the issues. We know that this school is having an issue. What are we going to do to help pull up this school?
And again, the board is responsible for hiring, firing, and evaluating the superintendent. So that is their big rock, if you want to use that word. They are the ones who have to evaluate whether or not the superintendent has done his or her job. Policy that is created by the board lately has lowered standards. So we have to have them reevaluate some of their policies. Students and teachers are supervised by that superintendent and should be supported, and that superintendent should, somebody just said, hire people smarter. Somebody who is a smart and wise person always surrounds themselves with people smarter than he or she. So that's what that superintendent should do. It would help with the succession planning if you have to have one.
I agree with a lot of what others have said, but policy drives culture as well. Our school system is hemorrhaging because we have a bad culture, and we have to correct that culture. And so we have to be able to correct policy that will drive that culture. And yes, it starts with the superintendent. A lot of what we have is because we haven't had a superintendent that's been here for more than 5 years. We have to have stability at the highest level in leadership. And then what we do is we govern that. So what we have to do is we have to look at somebody who's going to be here for longevity and has a history of longevity and understands how to deal with the current student population. It's all about culture, and our culture needs a retooling so that we can correct that. And the board is going to drive that through the policies that we engage.
Okay, we have a question that takes us online.
Yeah, I think that, we have a virtual audience, and I did receive a text. This might be for Rhonda, but if
I can answer real quick, but I have to go to a doctor's appointment for a patient.
Okay. Number one school board goal is every student graduates with meaningful employment or higher education opportunities. Can you tell us how many 2022 graduates achieved this goal?
Honestly, I can't. I cannot answer that number right now because, as many of you know, I was actually very sick and hospitalized for a lot of that time period and did not attend graduations this year. So I do not have the exact number. And I apologize, I'm a nurse case manager and I have a patient that's got a 10:15 appointment on Wendover Road.
But does anybody else know? This is just
I'm actually not sure those numbers have been released for last year yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think they've been released.
Back to us.
I'll try to find out what the actual graduation.
Let's give them a hand, but Winston has a question for you all that can say. Thank you so much, Brother. I'm sorry.
And 13 minutes away, it says. 13 minutes away, and I have 6 minutes. I'll drive safely.
Okay.
Okay, Winston Taylor.
While I appreciate you all acknowledging the inherent bias in standardized testing, However, we all know once these kids graduate and leave CMS, they will enter a world that is governed by inherently biased testing. So what are we doing as a policymaking board? What can you do to prepare these students to understand that they will enter a world with, again, governed by inherently biased testing, and how to overcome those obstacles? If they wanted to be a dentist, dental hygienist, or even sell dental equipment, they will have to take some type of testing that will, determine if they could be in that field.
I'll answer because when I retired, I went to work for a financial firm just because I couldn't sit still. And I taught SIE Series 7, Series 66 testing. And I had a young man who was a CMS graduate. Good guy. He couldn't pass the insurance test. It took him 4 times. He couldn't pass the SIE. It took him twice. And I started scratching my head going, what? He knows the information. He can't pass the test. And I said, okay, where'd you go to high school? I went to Huff. Did you take any tests? No, we did a lot of performance-based. My teachers did that. You didn't take tests? No. What'd you make on the SAT? A 900. That's why you went to Alabama, right? Right. Yeah, we got through it. I had to sit there and go back and teach him how to take a standardized test. Now, this is a 23-year-old young man thinking he's going to come out and hit the road running, and he had to take standardized tests. You're right. But we have to teach them how to take the test if they need to do that. And it could almost be a class. In fact, we used to have a 9th grade class called Freshman Focus, where they taught them how to take the SAT. They did away with it. I don't know why, but they do have SAT prep classes. They do have things like that. But if we know our students have to take the test, we need to have that as part of the curriculum. You got to take this test. We're going to teach you how to pass it, and we're going to go on so you can learn. That's just one component, not the whole thing. We do too much teaching to the current test, not how to take a test. And that will teach everybody the skill, because there is a skill, there is a way, there is a method to passing those tests. I teach it to high schoolers right now. And they pass, they do well. So yes.
Okay, Winfrey, did you need anyone else to answer that question?
I think that was very thorough.
Yeah. Okay. Pat, you still want to ask your question?
Yes, I do.
Okay, excuse me, before you ask your question, Pat, we did ask them to be here until 10, and of course, Rhonda had to leave, and Mr. Christian has to leave. So, for those that want to stay, they're allowing us to stay a little longer, and we do want to get announcements as well, so those who have
Please.
to leave, thank you all.
Excuse me, and thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Appreciate you. Okay, Pat.
When you all talk about policy and choosing your superintendent, based upon, I've only been here a second living in Charlotte. I moved here in 2014. I've watched you choose a superintendent based upon what you stated, your policy, what you're looking for. Yet you've replaced 3. So what are you doing incorrectly as a board that you're constantly choosing the wrong person to be our superintendent? So,
Well, luckily, we're not the board.
Yeah, none of us are on the board right now.
But I will tell you that we don't need to go to the same executive search firms. We need to look out differently. And the new board needs to look at what they look for in a superintendent. Superintendents have gone spiraling since about 2011, and we've not had good leadership. And then, you hire people that get fired or need to leave. So we have to do a more thorough background check, an understanding of what we're hiring. And so I'm a firm believer we need a big change. We need to look forward, not backwards, and not recycle what we've had.
Okay.
May I take a stab at that as well? Thank you. So, I think one of the things that we need is an organization builder. We've hired, we had one guy who was clearly, he was so ambitious, he was a resume builder. Wasn't here very long. The last hire, and I know because I told 4 of the members, don't hire this guy. But everybody liked him. And he's nice, and we think that's going to bring stability. And what I said was, no, nice doesn't bring stability. Leadership brings stability. And so, I think we've had enough pain now that the pain of the pain has become so much that we will change, and that we will focus on a strong leader who's an organization builder at this point. We're going to get it right. Hopefully, I'm the one leading the search committee when I'm on the board.
Just really briefly, if I could add to that, I think transparency with the public on who the candidates are, and actually informing individuals and allowing the community to be a part of that decision-making process. But of course, ultimately, through the leadership of the board, but being transparent with the community. Who are those final 3 or 4 candidates, and giving them an opportunity to hear from them directly if they're going to be leading our district.
Just to, jump onto that, because that's an excellent point, that even having those 3 or so, being there at the chamber down there in downtown Charlotte at the city government, just even having presentations of what their roles or what their expectations and how they would organize things. I think that's an excellent idea.
Okay, Crispin, did you have a quick?
Question. It's only for one person. At the NPO.
Yeah.
What is your idea of the discipline that should be brought back in these classrooms?
Well, the way I'm looking at discipline is that for instance, in a classroom, you usually have an expectation of what students ought to do. About whether they raise their hand to be addressed or they sit in their seat. Those are the type of things that should be somewhat consistent within the school. And then if they do that, or if they are really obnoxious and had arguments with the teacher, they should be able to be sent out of the room to a counselor. I've had teachers tell me that they have sent students, they would disrupt their students out of the classroom and come back with a lollipop in their mouth, which tells the teacher they don't listen to me. And at number 2, it reinforces the bad behavior within the child. So that's what I'm talking about discipline. It's really an expectation of behavior, and where you're civil to each other. I think that's an important thing. And you've seen it on the TV where there's all kinds of chaos going on within the Congress, et cetera. And but I think being civil is what one of the expectations of good behavior is. I hope that answers it.
Okay, once again, we'd like to thank you all so much. We have announcements that we're going to make, and then we will be just leaving this room. But everyone here is invited on Thursday, the 15th, from 4 to 7 p.m. here at the Belmont Regional Center. They're going to have community relations open house. So you're welcome here. Please come and support the Belmont Center, and we should come because we support them as well. And for those who have other announcements, you can give them to Steve, and he would post them on our website. And I'm a member of Memorial Presbyterian Church, and we're having Family Fun Day on Sunday. And I'd like for all of the candidates to come, and all of you are invited. It's from 11 to 2 o'clock at 2600 Bakersfield Road, Memorial Presbyterian Church. You have an announcement?
Yes, I just want to, I'm Carol Sawyer. I want to invite everyone to attend or watch the CMS board meeting tonight. We've talked a lot about our goals. Tonight we'll be doing some progress monitoring on our 3rd grade English language arts goal. If you go to our board docs, you'll see both that progress monitoring report and the questions that the board members asked of staff and their answers about that report. We will not be, this is a strategy which the board asked the questions, strategies that the superintendent plans to do to keep us on track or to get us back on track. We asked clarifying and deeper questions in writing ahead of time. So I encourage you, if you want to take a deep dive, to look at the documents on board docs and watch the meeting tonight.
Okay, thank you. We'd like to recognize our other officials here, Nasib Majid and Nancy, who's here with us this morning. But thank you all so much for your patience, and thank you for being here and sharing the information you shared with us this morning. You all have a wonderful, wonderful